Fast and loose and frankly disrespectful comments by the UK's Transport Secretary has potentially lost the UK a £1 billion investment into the UK, despite the government's promises that its primary objective is to boost the economy. Now, I promised you a brutally frank and open discussion and appraisal of what I see in the news and going on in the country, and that's what you'll get from me on this channel. So please do subscribe if you want this alternative to the mainstream media. I am independent and I have no editorial control. So let's take a look at what's going on here. Now, first of all, before I get into this, you might expect that a government minister's comments reflect the views of government. That's sort of the point. They are a member of government, so if they make comments, particularly if they are about the field that they are responsible for, you might reasonably expect that those are the comments held by the government on that particular field. But that is not the case in this story that I'm going to tell you about, because Sir Keir Starmer has disavowed these comments, which we'll come to in just a moment. But what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about the Transport Secretary, Louise Haigh. Now, I make no broad criticism of Louise here. I've seen some previous things that may well not reflect the current story that we're talking about here. This is just about this particular story. Now, she might well even believe the comments that she's made, but they have ostensibly had a direct effect on the investment into the UK. So let's take a look at what she said. Well, she said that she'd boycotted P&O Ferries. Now, this is all to do with the staffing debacle a few years ago. I'm not going to get into that in this video, but it's where they fired hundreds of workers in 2022 and replaced them with agency staff. As I said, I'm not going to get into that in this video. That's not the point of this video. There are probably multiple arguments on multiple fronts about that story, but this one in particular is where she said she had boycotted P&O in recent years and would encourage others to do so. Not only that, she also labelled P&O Ferries as a rogue operator. Now, as I said, she might have her personal views, she may well believe that, and other people might even agree with her. That is not really the point here. As the UK's Transport Secretary and this government's overall objective to growing the economy, they really should be a little bit mindful of how these comments come across, much like the comments of the Education Secretary, which I've criticised in recent videos, which I think even both sides of the political spectrum are in somewhat agreement with. There are obviously some outliers that think it's perfectly fine, and that's fine, I respect those views, but I think that has really pulled a lot of people together, and possibly so will this. Now, P&O Ferries is owned by DP World, which has now suggested that it's not going to attend this government's flagship investment summit on Monday, and they might postpone their investment announcement, which it was due to make on Monday. Now, this investment announcement, I understand it, and it's reported to be to the tune of over £1 billion into the UK's port expansion ongoing in the next few years. Now, in an interview with ITV News, Louise Haigh was asked whether she used this ferry service, and instead of giving a neutral answer, as you might expect a government minister to do, whilst keeping everybody happy and maintaining the bigger picture with this potential investment, she responded to say that she's been boycotting P&O Ferries for 2.5 years and would encourage other consumers to do the same, and then described P&O Ferries as a rogue operator. Now, if I were fortunate to own a company big enough as DP World, I might be quite upset by that, and I might decide to pull my investment in the country as well. But then, as I said, governments really should be held accountable and own the comments that its ministers make. Although when asked about this very comment in interview, Sir Keir Starmer disavowed those comments and said the following.
Was she right to say that? Well, look, that's not the view of the government.
So was she right to say that? And Sir Keir Starmer responded to say, that is not the view of the government. So already this is evidence of the infighting that you've probably read about in the media, with disagreements to and fro even within the government itself. So one might reasonably ask, if there is not an agreement and an accord between the views and the attitudes of the Prime Minister and his ministers, What else is there going on that they don't agree about, with them making these very public statements in interview, which obviously can have a detrimental effect on everything else going forward? Now, some people have asked me about my views on other actions that this Labour government has taken, so I thought I might address a few of them in this video, because I had a conversation just recently where somebody said they couldn't quite work out where I personally sit on the political spectrum. There's two reasons for that. One is I don't think it's relevant and I don't think it's important. I will tell you what I think of what's happening, whichever government it is that's doing it and whichever side of the political spectrum they are on when they are doing these things or casting these views. I'll tell you what I think of it, and hopefully with some basis in reasoning and fact. And sometimes if I'm corrected in something that I've said or misspoke, I'm perfectly fine and happy to correct those positions. And otherwise it's just a view based on reasoning and fact, which hopefully I can justify or give you something to think about. So I usually like to give you both sides of the coin, and so allow you to decide what you think, but given a more balanced and reasonable approach. So I'll come back to some of those things in a moment. Now, just as an aside and on something of a personal note, some of you will know, especially if you know me personally, that I've recently been promoted to Master 7th Degree Black Belt in Taekwondo. And as a martial artist of well over 30 years now, I train regularly, I train intensively. I say recently, it's over a year ago now, I decided to cut alcohol. Well, at the time, I decided to cut it down or out for a short while. But as I say, that was well over a year ago now. But also as a martial artist, I also advocate drinking lots of water, but I tended to get bored with water. So I tried fizzy water, I tried some of the flavored waters that you could buy in shops. None of them really tasted great, and I could never really get on with fizzy water. But as I gave up alcohol completely, a company called Holy reached out to me, and they do iced teas, hydration drinks and energy drinks, all with natural ingredients, and they taste absolutely fantastic. There's a huge range of flavors available. My favorite is the strawberry and kiwi, but they also do watermelon and pomegranate and lots of others. And they give me something really interesting and recreational to drink at night instead of drinking other kind of fizzy drinks and those kind of things, and in particular, instead of alcohol. They are extremely tangy and delicious. They make you want to reach for more and more, which means you drink more and more water, which is great. And of course, as they're a partner supporting my channel here, I can offer you a great discount. You can use the code Barrister5 to get £5 off your first order, or just the code Barrister to get 10% off either a larger order or an ongoing order, so you benefit from this discount going forward. Use the link that's in the description below with the codes that I've mentioned, Barrister5 or just Barrister. I would recommend that you go with one of their starter packs so you get a range of flavors and one of the shakers as well. But of course, just choose whatever flavor you think you would normally like. These are just like your favorite flavors amplified, and they will make you want to drink more and more. So please do check out Holy. I'm grateful to them for supporting my channel. You'll love the drinks. I love them and I drink them every day. So now coming back to some of these points here, some of the things this says Keir Starmer has delivered in 100 days. This is obviously a UK Labour status post. These are the things that they say they've done, and there are obviously views on both sides of the fence here. Now, I don't want to get overly political. I don't want to say, you know, here's where I stand and here's my views and whatever. That's not what I'm going to do. I'm not going to tell you what to think, and I'm not going to tell you that I'm right, you're wrong, and all this sort of stuff. What I will do is just cast a few thoughts on a few of these things, because a lot of people say or have said in the comments that I'm anti-Labour and I'm attacking them for everything possible. That's not entirely the case. I'm saying what I think about what I see. Now, a lot of people have said, why did I not criticise Conservatives? Well, I was talking about other things at the time, and these are more topical things at the moment, so it just happens that I'm talking about these. So let's take a look at some of these here. I won't go through all of them. I'm not going to bore you to tears, but the first one on the list here, ended the junior doctor strikes. Now, obviously, very quickly, they agreed a pay rise and they ended the strikes by increasing pay. Now, some people might criticise that and say a large chunk of money has been thrown at them just to give in to their demands and end the strikes and make it easy. But the other side of the coin is if you actually look at lots of these numbers, and I don't profess to be an expert in economics or anything, but when you look at the numbers, lots of NHS staff salaries have been massively under inflation for many years, and they've arguably lost out on thousands of pounds for many years, and even in the situation where a pay rise might be above inflation, that will not necessarily take into account all of the back years where pay rises may have been under the rate of inflation, meaning their money is not as powerful as it was the year before. Obviously, if inflation goes up, let's just use a round number and say that in year 2, things are 10% more expensive than they were in year 1, then obviously your money from year 1 is not as powerful as it is in year 2. Therefore, your income versus expenditure are getting further and further apart. So if you are being paid a pay rise which is under the rate of inflation over 5 or 10 years, then by year 10, your salary is way under really what it ought to be if it were to stay in line with inflation. So on the whole, you might then argue that this is a good thing because they should be paid in line with inflation, because otherwise, if their pay rises don't keep up with inflation, they are massively underpaid when this gets to 5, 10 and 15 years of having these pay rises that simply don't keep up with inflation. Those are the two sides of the coin. On the one hand, it could be giving into their demands and giving them everything they want. On the other hand, it could be, well, there's been many years that they've been underpaid and the pay rises haven't been keeping up with inflation, and therefore they deserve the pay rise. Those are the two sides of the coin. And as I said, I'm not going to tell you what to think on this. I'm just going to give you a different perspective. Likewise, the train strikes, similar thing going on there. Launching new legislation to bring the UK's railways back under public ownership. Well, this is a double-edged sword, because if something is under public ownership, then it's obviously supposed to be for the benefit of the public and not to be a pure profit-making business. Whereas many people might say, well, a publicly owned business is not necessarily going to be the best run, the most highly efficient, the most high quality, and so on. So there are different arguments here. Many people might argue that a commercially run for-profit business is arguably going to have a better service and be more on time, etc. But the other side of that argument is a commercial business might be doing the best they can to maximize profits whilst keeping their costs at a minimum, therefore not giving you the best quality. Lots of people that have been stuffed into trains and haven't had a seat, and trains not running on time, and all of these sort of things certainly contribute to that argument. So again, there are two sides to this coin, and it's a double-edged sword. When we look at things such as the rollout of free breakfast clubs for all primary school children through an early adopters scheme. On the one hand, obviously, that sounds great because children get these free breakfast clubs, but at the same time, they're attacking private schools. Now, the very reality here is that there are going to be, according to the latest reports that I've read, up to maybe 90,000 children that will have to move out of private schools into the state schools. So 90-odd thousand children that will have their education interrupted. Not to mention that the VAT that they would have paid will not be paid, obviously, if they move out of the private schools, and therefore that's taken away from the prospective amount of tax that they raise in this scheme. But also, they will then cost the state schools whatever amount of money it costs for a child, anything I understand between £8,000 and £30,000, depending on the needs of the child and so on. So suddenly you've got 90-odd thousand children moving into state schools costing anything between £8,000 and £30,000 per child. That's going to swallow up probably the vast majority, I'm just guessing, of the money that they would have raised. Now, I say I'm guessing because just looking very loosely at the numbers here is all that it really appears to me that the government has done, because the one report that they looked at now seems to be greatly underestimating how many children will be moving out and what it's going to cost. And the cost-benefit analysis of doing that, of course, as against disrupting, at least according to one report, up to 90,000 children's education in the middle of whatever stage they're at in their education. So again, two ways of looking at that here. And you could do this with any government. So I'm doing this as the exercise because you could do this with any government and any list of things that they say they've done. Looking at this one down here at introduce new protections for renters. On the one hand, looking at rights for people renting properties, because no fault evictions obviously turn someone's life upside down. They have to get out of the property and so on. And so it's not very fair for them on one side of the coin. On the other hand, landlords, speaking from experience and from many clients, landlords have in many cases and we've experienced this personally, landlords have had tenants stop paying rent So they go months without paying rent. They owe thousands of pounds in the rent money. They go on a debt relief scheme, which is called breathing space, whereby you cannot take any steps in removing them from the property or enforcing the debt that they owe for 60 days as a typical duration. Longer if it's on mental health grounds. And if it's on mental health grounds, you cannot take any steps to evict that tenant or chase that outstanding debt until they've finished the mental health treatment, which I don't think there's an end date to it. We've known someone through a lawyer colleague who's been on that scheme for nearly 5 years, and they haven't been able to remove the tenant from the property or chase the outstanding debt. So one might argue that actually that's not very good for landlords anyway. And so again, there are two sides to that argument. So it really depends which way you look at these things. Looking at another one here, scrapped the ban on onshore wind and unblocked solar schemes. On the one hand, that's great because it will generate green energy, which is obviously good for the environment and so on and so forth. On the other hand, people might reasonably argue that that's going to take up farmland and this sort of stuff, and people might not want to live near a wind farm or solar farms and things like that. So again, two sides of the story. And this could go on and on. With everything that they say they've done is good, there are other arguments to say that actually that wasn't a good thing because there are equal arguments against it, or something else that will suffer as a detriment in response or as a direct sacrifice in order to make these things happen. So really, just to allay those allegations that I'm standing firmly on one side or another, there are always two sides to this coin. That is what I aim to provide you on this channel. But I will call out what I see and when I see it. For example, when someone is making these comments, derogatory comments against a large company which was about to make a huge investment into the UK, and as I call it, these are my words, my opinion, based on what I've seen here. I say that they are fast and loose and disrespectful comments to a large company that was going to make an investment into the UK, ostensibly, and now has said that it's may postpone its investment and it will not attend this investment summit on Monday, where otherwise they were going to make or were considering to make a £1 billion investment into the UK ports expansion. And after being called a rogue operator and the UK's Transport Secretary saying that she has boycotted the company for 2.5 years and would encourage other consumers to do the same. Frankly, I'm not surprised that the company has said, well, fine, we won't invest this money into the UK then. We'll do that elsewhere. And so these are really the dangers that we have. Now, I'd also like to just give you some insight to my background in my work with company mergers and acquisitions, both as a lawyer and previously I've worked as a management consultant for massive companies doing mergers and acquisitions and this sort of stuff. So a group companies acquiring new companies or merging with other companies. One of the first things that they do is to merge the front desk. It's just called merging the front desk, merging the office, or merging reception. There's different companies have different terms for it, but what they do is they bring together the very front desk of these two companies or groups of companies that they're planning to merge. And what that really means is they allow the companies in the background to continue working in the way that they already did before. And the reason for that is very straightforward, but critically important, because each of those, let's say make it simple, you've got two companies that want to merge, and so they want to become one company, but they operate very differently. They've got different computer systems, they've got different accounting systems, they've got different structures, they've got different managers at different levels doing different things, but they want to become one company. So the first thing they do is they merge the front desk. So to the world, it is now one company. They have merged. So company A and company B are now one big company. But the way they operate behind the scenes can't just be slammed together, otherwise it doesn't work. If you were to force company A, you are now using the software and the accounting systems of company B, and you've all got to learn it overnight and forget the system you're currently using. That's all gone. You're now using this new system. That's going to cause chaos for company A, and lots of things will go wrong. And I've seen this go wrong, and they've ended up with millions of pounds in debt, in unrecovered monies. I've seen this firsthand, Huge bills and sums of money that have just not even been billed, not being billed properly. Therefore, it hasn't been paid properly. We're talking tens of millions of pounds of debt here that the company's just effectively lost, because in one case it was beyond 6 years, so they couldn't even recover it through court, because after 6 years they just can't recover the money. And so that is a disaster. What they do instead is they merge the front desk, they let the companies behind do things as they always did, and gradually they merge them onto either one system or the other. But they do it slowly and over time. And my concern with this government here is they're trying to do so much in such a short period of time, because, as they keep reminding us, they've had 14 years of another government doing things that they don't like, and now they seem to want to do everything all at once. And so they are slamming their views and their opinions and their policies and their desired actions and movements all within a short period of time. And in my personal view, I don't often give you personal views, but in my personal view, that is why some of these calamities are happening. We've got these statements being made by ministers, which are then disavowed by the Prime Minister himself, Sir Keir Starmer, to say that is not the view of the government. Well, to the public, it is. And to that company, it is, because she's the UK's Transport Secretary. And it would be just like Sir Keir Starmer saying, well, the Education Secretary's comments, derogatory comments, in my view, about private schools, they are not the views of the government, even though that's what she posted. It's a very divisive tweet. I'll link my video talking about it in the description below. I think it's abhorrent. And I think that has united a lot of people on both sides of the political spectrum to say they don't agree with the tone with which she posted that tweet. So that really is the problem here. I think they are trying to do too much in a short period of time. But as I said, I am not partisan. I will call out what I see from whatever side of the fence I see it. But anyway, I promised you a frank and open view of what I see. That's what you get. So if you like that kind of thing, please do hit the subscribe button, like the video. And as always, thank you for watching.